So let's come home to this body once again, our old friend. And to begin, let's take a few full breaths. And by that I mean a complete inhale, filling the belly, the chest, holding for a moment or two, and then releasing slowly. A few more nicely rounded full breaths. And letting the breathing find its own level of comfort. And to support and reinforce presence, I'll offer a very short scan of this miraculous living organism. So bringing attention to the face. Noticing the aliveness there. What do you feel? And allowing that careful attention to expand to the sides of the head. Experiencing the ears, the temple region. And inside the ears, beneath the skin. And allowing that careful, loving attention to extend to the rear of the head. And now the very top of the head. Noticing the aliveness there in the scalp. The aliveness in the hair. And now experiencing the entire head. Face, sides, back, top. Experiencing the surface and beneath the surface. And around the surface. And allowing that kindly attention to descend through the neck and out to both shoulders. What do you notice in this moving miracle? And now allowing the attention to cascade down the arms, both arms simultaneously, through the wrists and into the hands and fingers, experiencing both the aliveness and volume of space known as the arms. And now bringing attention to the upper part of the torso, the rib cage. You might notice that it expands and contracts with the breath. Experiencing the front of the rib cage, the sides, and the back. And also allowing attention to move inside. Experiencing, if you are able, the movements and aliveness of the organs protected by that rib cage. And now inviting that soft awareness to the lower portion of the torso. You might invite a softening of the belly if it's armored in any way. And experiencing the living sensations on the sides of the lower part of the torso and the small of the back region. And now cascading further into the buttocks and the hips and the genitals. And a very gentle awareness. Feeling the alignment there. And now moving slowly and gracefully, and becoming aware of both legs simultaneously. Experiencing both the aliveness and volume of space in the legs. And on down through the ankles and the feet and the toes. And now allowing the awareness of the body to expand throughout the entire body simultaneously. What do you notice? Is there movement or vibration or temperature, warmth, coolness? What is it like to experience? What is it like to experience this miracle right now? And now allowing and inviting the awareness to extend in front of you, as close or as far as you're comfortable. Kind of like opening a door and allowing the awareness to just circulate as it wishes in front. And now, in the same manner, inviting that soft awareness to circulate behind, opening, if you will, a door or a large window and allowing it to move freely, noticing its capacity to move and to know. Without being hindered by a boundary. And now inviting that awareness to extend to the right. And now inviting that awareness to the left. And what do you notice? And inviting the awareness now to move below, to circulate below what is known as the body. Now inviting the awareness to circulate above. And now simply invite the awareness in all directions simultaneously. Opening and removing all the doors, windows, walls, ceilings, and floor. So there is this awareness that doesn't seem to be bound up. Does it have an edge? Does it have an age? Does it have a gender? Does there seem to be any localization of an inside or an outside? Does this awareness have a quality of knowing? Alertness? Is there tranquility or agitation? Is there receptivity and acceptance? Is it really true that awareness receives and allows all phenomena without discrimination? Just arising and passing, sounds, thoughts, sensations. For a moment, let's revisit the sensations of the body. Points of sensation like stars in the night sky. No arms, no legs, no torso. There's intermittent points of sensation in the vastness of awareness. What is aware? What knows? Now release any sense of investigation and see if it's possible to not just rest in awareness, but to be awareness. Bright, illumined, knowing, but not anything specific, awake. Without separation. Everything, the source, pristine awareness. And to finish up, once more come into the body. Feel the touch points, your feet on the floor, the chair, the air on your face, on any exposed skin. When you're ready, just open your eyes if they're closed. And just a few comments about that before we take a break. That was an attempt at guiding in support of a little stability of the heart and mind to begin with. The body scan kind of bringing our attention there. And then it was an investigation or an exploration of what is this awareness? With a kind of almost scientific exploration. Does it have a boundary? Does it not? Does it have a gender, an age? So kind of playing in that and exploring, in a sense, exploring, well, what is this self? Is it as limited as I might think it is, or not? And then the last part was a kind of like, okay, let's just, if we're lucky at that point, if we're tranquil enough and awake enough, is it possible to just drop all the investigation and actually be that awareness? Not rest in awareness, but be it. Which you could say being the rug or the pews or each other or the trees outside or everything. So this is all endlessly fascinating to me. I hope you're not bored to tears, but let's take a break and then we'll talk about some of this best we're able. It's never easy to try to explain this stuff. So, all right, so 10 minutes. The other day I was reflecting on all the years of teaching and all the attempts at trying to articulate the essence of what you might say a reasonable spiritual practice is. And I was recalling on more than just several occasions speaking with other teachers of this ilk, that we'd sometimes end up we'd be talking about teaching and we'd end up kind of grinning and chuckling a little bit in the fact that every talk we give is a Four Noble Truths talk in a way. It's like you don't really get around that because it's so important. So in the largest sense, and I'm going to start with the Four Noble Truths and then we'll kind of move from there. You can appreciate the Four Noble Truths that as maybe the wise, internalized understanding of the way nature works. The wise, internalized understanding of just the way that nature works. And these truths, they're very practical, they're down to earth. They are and have been utilized by millions of people over the years to support them as they kind of try to navigate the vicissitudes of life. And for those of you that might be new to them or not completely clear on them, I'll briefly try to outline them. the Pali term, Chattari Arya Sakani, is generally translated to mean Four Noble Truths. That's the most common translation. You see it everywhere. But I came across another translation that I really like, and it's the Four Truths of the Spiritually Noble Person. The Four Truths of the Spiritually Noble Person. These are things that people get to know and utilize as they move through existence. So that's the one I currently like the best. So these four truths are understood to be what created or supported the Buddha's realization, his enlightenment. And that they really became the basic of his pedagogy when he taught for those 45 years and walked all over what is now northern India and tried to share what he learned through all his practice and the discovery or rediscovery in his own way what these truths were. And yes, he did walk for those 45 years. And from what we know, that he refused to ride on the back of an animal or ride in a cart that was drawn by an animal. So I'd like to think if he was around now, he'd be a real supporter of animal rights or, something like that. But so anyway, the first of these truths of the spiritually noble person, it's really just a simple acknowledgement that when you get born into this creation, you're going to have many, many instances where you're going to be uncomfortable for one reason or another. You're going to feel what you might call stress. You're going to feel various types of dissatisfaction, unease, all imagined flavor of discomfort. So that's the suffering, if you will. In one description, there's lots of descriptions of the Pali word is dukkha or suffering, is that anything that puts a squeeze on the heart, that's suffering. And it can be the most seemingly innocuous things. I watch myself, I put out all this food for the birds, and these squirrels, they just come and gorge themselves. Okay, I get they have to eat and they got families and the whole thing. But it's costing a lot of money. And so I watch myself contract a little bit, And so that's a squeeze on the heart. Small, it doesn't really mean anything. So I borrowed a have-a-heart trap and I trapped like 8 of them in the course of 24 hours. Took them what I thought was far enough away. And then in another 12 hours, I'm not saying they were all back, but the relatives found that food again. So, and watch myself kind of contract during a minute. It's like, I thought I did this. That's the suffering that we're born into. It could be simple things. I knocked over a compost bucket a week or so ago, and it was overfilled, and it was turning into what compost turns into. And there was a lot of liquid, and it kind of went all over the floor. And it was like, I said some bad words, and I could feel myself contract. And then I'm down there, oh, this is unpleasant, the smell, and on my hands, and with a spatula, and all of that. So those are kind of common annoyances. You lose your car keys, you're a little late for an appointment or something like that. But probably most of us here, we've experienced things on the other end of that continuum. Kind of heartfelt, shattering losses. one form of abuse or another, betrayals. And sometimes we're confronted with a chronic illness that we have to navigate, or a terminal illness. So the fact that this exists and we have to work with it, that's the first truth of a spiritually noble person, that they understand this is the deal, it comes with being born, and so the second truth of a spiritually noble person has to do with the fact that there's actually a cause for not so much these events, but there is a cause for our suffering about these events. You could say that it's caused by a kind of misperceiving of just how nature works, and then fighting against it in some way. You're not understanding how it works, you fight against it. And the fundamental ignorance around this often has to do with losing sight of the fact that everything is impermanent. Everything in this creation arises, passes, has its flowering or whatever, but it's impermanent. And intellectually, you all get that. Of course you do. It's fundamental to nature. It is the nature of nature. You know it, but it's difficult to live it. And a lot of times you don't like it. You quarrel with it. You know, things are changing. So it's perfectly natural. We're here, we've been gifted all these senses. And when one of the sense organs is in operation, we see something, what comes along with that is a feeling tone, automatically. It's very natural. And we either feel that it's pleasant, it's unpleasant, or it's neutral. You know. And that's just how we're wired as human beings. Okay? So we have contact with our environment, we experience it as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It's no biggie. Now, the slippery slope that happens with that, and this is, we're still talking about the cause of suffering, is that when you begin to either grasp at something that you find pleasant or start pushing away something you don't like or find unpleasant, then we're beginning a different part of this process. Now, at that point, we're clutching or grasping or trying to make things different than they are. And there's nothing wrong with that on the surface. But when we become lost in it endlessly, or if we find something that we think is pleasant or we want, and we want to hold on to it, and we want to keep it, and we get tighter and tighter around it, that flies in the face of nature, because everything that we have will change and vanish. And on the other side of the coin, when we're fussing about something we don't have, well, there's nothing wrong with creating some level of comfort for ourselves. But when it becomes the end-all be-all, and we're thrashing around all the time to get rid of every little thing that's a little bit uncomfortable, that creates anxiety, it tires us out, and it's that kind of stance to the world is a cause of a lot of suffering. And certain things we can't do anything with. Our health, for the most part. I mean, we can do all the eat the right food, exercise, blah, blah, blah. We're going to get old. Things are going to break down. There's going to be physical pain. Now, this practice will help us work with that physical pain, but it's a slightly different discussion than the kind of mental anguish of spilling the compost bucket or losing a loved one. So what happens is we start out with a little bit of grasping, a little bit of clutching on, and then we kind of sink deeper into it, and then it becomes more energetic and more, I mean, you could say this is a path of addiction in a way, where our claws go deeper into it. And then we're not only just craving a little bit, we are like clinging onto it. Our claws are way deep. We can't barely pull them out. So one way I like to look at the second truth is that it has this kind of stickiness to it. That when you're wanting something, craving something, lusting after something, you're kind of stuck to it and you're pulling it towards you and you're trying to hold it and keep it from changing. And on the other way, it's on the flip side, there is a kind of stickiness of pushing something away, getting all involved in it and kind of wrapped around it. And so that's way different than kind of acceptance, not so much resisting every little thing. Flowing, we know the difference. You know? And I think it was, I think it was Thoreau that talked about living in Walden, about living a life of quiet desperation. Now, sometimes when we're grasping or pushing away, it's not so quiet. But there's 8 billion of us, and that's mostly what goes on. I think I mentioned before, I have a friend that whenever and still, even a couple of weeks ago, I asked him how he was doing. I don't see him very much. He says, well, I get up in the morning and I crawl towards pleasure. And if I have to, I crawl away from pain. And that's my life, he says. I mean, he's joking, but it's kind of the deal. So there's a related belief that could be considered ignorant, and we were playing with it a little bit in our meditation today. It's a mistaken belief that everything, including yourself, is separate, solid, independent of everything else. And if that's the stance, you're often going to feel embattled in this world. It's kind of me against everything else. And Nisargadatta said it like this, simply. If you imagine yourself as separate from the world will appear as separate from you, and you will experience desire and fear. That's it, kind of wanting and aversion. So that's the second truth of the noble ones. Now, the third truth of the noble person, that's good news. Because the truth that there is an end to this dissatisfaction or unsatisfactoriness or suffering or kind of squeezing in the heart. And it can be ended by finding ways to just release that cycle of craving and desire. Find ways of reducing that sticky attachment. You know, that's where mindfulness comes in. You know, and if we can learn to be aware of what's going on, when it's going on, we have an opportunity But if we're not aware of what's going on when it's going on, we're just kind of in this kind of reactive process of generally grasping or pushing away. So that's why the simple practices of sitting and paying attention to our breath or sensations or sounds or whatever kind of sharpens up our capacity to, like, in the proper moment, go, oh, time out. This is what's happening. I'm fearful, or I'm this, or I'm that. And we have an opportunity there. But if we don't, if we're not aware, well, then we're just going to react out of old conditioning. So, I mean, simply said, if you can learn to relax a little bit, you're going to have a little bit of relief in terms of your overall suffering. And if you can learn to relax and let go a whole lot, well, then you're going to have a whole lot of reduction or possibly the elimination of suffering. And that's what this practice is about. And the fourth truth of the Noble Ones is that there's a path and means of support to reduce or eliminate this kind of angst and suffering. And it's called the Eightfold Path. Now, I'm not going to go into that, but just suffice to say that there's a lot of spiritual paths that have, or philosophies that have a lot of the elements of the Eightfold Path in it, and there's a lot of cross-pollination. It's not like it's got the whole deal, but it's very succinct, and it's a nice way of looking at it, the way Buddhism does it. But it's shot through the deeper philosophies and the bona fide religious practices. So that's another talk for comparative religion and philosophy. So it all boils down in managing this life is how soon can we be awake to what's happening, or that we're off center, or that there's some suffering happening, and what might we do about it? What kind of skillful means might we bring to bear? I mean, sometimes it seems like magic to me. If I wake up in a moment and notice, oh, look at you, Pat, you're like contracted over X, Y, or Z. Just in that recognition, there's like a spaciousness that comes over. Now, I still may be wrapped around the axle a little bit, but not as much. It's just totally different. And sometimes it just eliminates it. Oh, look at you, you silly fool. You're all, hooked into this again. So that moment of recognition is really something. The practice essentially tells us that when we recognize what's going, we can't do anything when we don't recognize. We're just floundering, reacting, generally making a mess, But when we recognize it, the general instructions, and there's lots of skillful means, are basically, okay, now turn yourself toward the experience as fully as you can right now, with as much mindfulness and compassion, equanimity as you can bring forward. It's like, oh, I'm afraid, or I'm angry. Oh, where do I feel it? What kind of thoughts are going on with it? So we kind of explore it, investigate it. And, oh, this hurts. Can I bring some compassion for myself? So we're working, that's the basic foundational practice. And if that's all we get some facility with, it's worth the price of admission. It reduces our suffering, and by virtue of that, reduces the suffering of the people who have to deal with us. So that's really a crude outline on how the Four Noble Truths work and how the basic practice works. But there's much more. there's much more to explore. And tonight we could call it the domain of the mystic. What is that? What are all these kind of people throughout the ages and these kind of obtuse explanations for the nature of things? What are they talking about? And all of them have said in one form or another, you really can't, words don't quite get there. So you do all these approximations, Tibetans call it pointing out instructions. Not really an explanation, it's just, I'm gonna do this for a while and something might happen, and then you'll know through experience. You'll have the same experience of Meister Eckhart or Teresa of Avila or some of these great teachers, Ramana Maharshi, And so over time, and it varies from day to day, but over time, if we're able to bring a little modicum of stability and tranquility into our practice, and that's why a daily formal practice, I think, is a really good thing. And trying to be mindful as you move through the day. So as we build that capacity, even just a little bit, we'll have some moments, some brief moments. And sometimes those moments will be extended of tranquility or peacefulness or deep, alert rest. And that's when the pump is kind of primed for further openings. It's in those moments. You could say, well, classically, you could say, well, all the five hindrances have relaxed for a little while. And now there's an opening, a portal to the possibility. And so that opens organically. And it's not like it's not there. It's there for all of us all the time. This domain of the mystic, or the full emptiness, or the source, or the great natural perfection, or God, or however you want to name it. It's not somewhere else. I mean, there are intermittent clouds and storms and things, but when the sky opens, and there are ways of kind of priming the pump. And I think these little practices are it. And basic mindfulness practice is a gem, That's when that glide path opens up for either a moment, glimpse, or some moments, there is a deep knowing of what is true and the interconnectedness of everything. And from that is the scent of, the smell of, the upwelling of love. When there's a moment of actually feeling part of everything, there's just love, How could there be anything else but? So we have, and in the end, there's really nothing effortful about this. And you can't force it. It all kind of happens through relaxation and accepting ourselves and being curious and investigating. Well, what is this self? What is this awareness? How come it's not just right here? How can I feel stuff everywhere? And where's the path? We're exploring. And it doesn't take really any effort. Just a little curiosity. And first, the openings might be intermittent. You go, wow, what is that? I want some more of that. And then it extends a little more. And that truth that the domain of the mystic is your home. And it's not a home somewhere else. It's a home right here. It's right now. It's just a relaxation away. Is kind of my feeble attempt at describing what many folks have tried to describe over the years. So I think I'll stop there. And if there are any questions or answers or comments about the meditation or anything in your practice or anything I've said tonight, we'll talk about it.
So I was just going to ask if the meditation part is recorded and that we can hear it again and
Yes,
experience that again, hopefully.
yes.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
Thank you for the meditation.
Just the talks with the guided meditations before it also.
You've answered all our questions.
I've just confused everybody. That's what
I think it's really good to review the basics like that. Take us back to the Four Noble Truths. I find them very easy. Yeah. Like doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
Grateful for that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I find myself, I love to review them on the fly. It's like, okay, what's going on here? Where am I in the truths? Oh, obviously I'm here, you know, I'm suffering, I'm contracted, or whatever. And what's the cause of that, you know?
So when you're talking about reverse aversion or kind of pushing away what you don't like, I got this real strong image of the tar baby from, you know, the Brer Rabbit myth. And it's like, yeah, you know, sometimes the more you try to push away something, the more it just sticks to you. And then pretty soon
Absolutely.
you know, you are just enveloped in it. And it's, I think if I can, and that's humorous to me too. So it's a great kind of tool. It's like, I'm doing the tar baby. I'm fighting with the tar baby here.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
appreciate that kind of helping bring me to that realization.
Yeah. I mean, we want to have some comfort in our life. So we do a certain amount of things. And so part of the skill of a spiritual practice is knowing when we've gone overboard, you know, what's too much? Can I just kind of be with what is a little bit, and it's unpleasant, and so what? You know, does it all have to be kind of like laid out in comfort? And we can make ourselves crazy as a tar baby, you know, just stuck, one hand in the other, and then and we're tired and cranky. But I do think most Dharma talks are Four Noble Truths talks, because that's the foundation. I mean, the Buddha, when he was traveling around, it was like, okay, here we are. We all got born here, and all these things are going to happen, and a lot of it's going to be unpleasant. A lot of it's going to be pleasant, and what are we going to do? Kind of a hammer and a nail. How can we be with this? And that's what he did. But the offshoot of that was all kinds of other openings happen. When the mind gets quiet and tranquil, it opens into realms, you know, that have been attempted to be described, and feelings of such unity and unification that you know. But if anybody just pays attention to the Four Noble Truths, exercises that, their life is going to be so much easier just there. You don't need to do anything else. But those openings will happen. They almost have to if you apply yourself. They do. So. Susan?
Thanks, Pat. I think you did a great job of weaving together these two seeming like really diverse areas, the Fourth Noble Truth and then what you call the domain of the mystic. And what strikes me is that I think it can be seen in two different ways. When we're coming into it, the Four Noble Truths are foundational and so incredibly helpful, as you pointed out in many ways. I think for some people, when they go further and further in it, it flips around so that the reality is seen from those openings, which we have sometimes. And then we recognize coming back into daily, I'd say coming back because you never left. But anyway, as we look back into our daily, the squirrels, I love that. That still can happen. But I think there's a different quality, the sense of love or recognition or more spaciousness around that, even in our irritation that they're all back. So what I'm trying to say is I think there are two different ways that as we begin, we must, not must, but find it incredibly important, the Four Noble Truths and the steps that the Buddha laid out. But he was always pointing beyond, and he wasn't just saying that sometime. I think he was pointing beyond to that, as that's really the reality, folks. And he knew it, but you can't just say that. We've got to work at it. So it is, as you said, so hard to explain it, but I think it's meaningful to say there's a flip that can happen in our understanding so that we come back with a different spaciousness about the Four Noble Truths and still practice them. It's not like we forget it. It's not like, oh, it's a spiritual bypass. You forget it all. You just go. No, you never forget it, but you integrate it. It's not two different things.
Beautifully put.
Well, thanks, Ben.
Yeah, that the kind of full emptiness, open experience does inform the squirrels and everything else.
Yes.
You know, the compost bucket, whatever or the loss or the, you know.
So I'm not quite sure I totally understand this, but it's my sense or feeling that often we sum up like into the term letting go, and that the realm that you've talked about tonight is sort of related to the Four Noble Truth stuff. Is that what do we let go into? And that's into what we truly are, which is awareness. And you mentioned some pointers, or, you know, some of these teachers, some of whom you mentioned, had practices that, of course, I'll misattribute them, but Nisargadatta said something like his teacher just told him to say "I am" over and over, or Ramana Maharshi might have been the one who was that. But I'm wondering,
No, it was Nisargadatta.
right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have any particular pointers like that you have found to be particularly impactful in recognizing.
Yeah, and I think that's part of our challenge, is all of us to kind of search, explore, experiment, and see what works for us. I use a little internal meditation words, and it could be as simple as now, or here, or bright. And I also use the nada sound, it's called. I think that was a Hindu terminology that people, some number of people, it's not tinnitus, but it's a kind of white noise sound that kind of relaxing into that kind of has the capacity to open. Even the word open sometimes, kind of expands the kind of awareness bubble till it pops, and then there's no inside outside for some moments, glimpse. I'm sure I can think of others, but it's a worthy experimentation, exploration, what seems to do when you're walking down the street. Well, what could be supportive? Is it a breath? Is it expanding out? Is it, what might it be? Is it just starting with trying to feel the essence of a tree, the living being of a tree or something? And then might it pop into everything? And then you're no longer there. There's just everything and love intermittently till the squirrels come after you. Well, maybe it's a wrap for tonight. Thank you all very much. It's great to be here with you.